Oh, dare we dream, because it seems the White House and Republicans are on the cusp of a deal, at least for the debt ceiling. And of course, that deal would only last about 6 weeks while negotiations happen. And the compromise doesn't do anything to end the partial shutdown of the government. And the gridlock is starting to take its toll. Look at this poll from the Associated Press and GFK. 62% mainly blame Republicans for the shutdown, while about half blame President Obama or the Democrats. Approval ratings are tanking. Only 37% approve of the president's job performance. Congress is at rock bottom. They have only a 5% approval rating. Joining me now, Jason Johnson, an HLN contributor and professor of political science at Hiram College, and Patricia Murphy, contributor for the Daily Beast and founder and editor of Citizen Jane Politics. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so Jason, my first question is, who are these 5% that think Congress is doing a good job?
I don't know.
Who
I'm
are
very
they?
worried about who these people are. I think the U.S. revolution was started with higher approval ratings than this. I mean, for Congress to be that low is an embarrassment. I think it should bring every single person to the table. And what we've seen here is this group of members in the GOP, they've dragged down everybody. The president, Harry Reid, no one wins. This needs to end soon.
Well, Patricia, I mean, the growing anger out there, is it? I mean, Republicans and Democrats are meeting at the White House today.
They are meeting at the White House today, which I think anybody can agree is at least some progress after both sides have said, we're willing to talk but not negotiate. Well, that doesn't really help anybody out of this situation. But I think it is not wise to put too much hope into this being some sort of signal of a big breakthrough coming, because we have seen even the president and John Boehner over past years actually strike a deal, come to an agreement, walk out of the room and say, we've got a deal, we're ready to go. And then John Boehner can't get that through his own House Republican caucus. So even if there were a deal to come out of these talks, that is only the beginning of a very difficult process. And so to me, it's good news that they're meeting, but it's certainly no cause for any great hope, unfortunately.
That makes me want to run from the room, actually,
Yeah.
because the president has said he'll accept this deal, this temporary deal, with no Republican provisions. How's that negotiating, Jason?
Well, it is in a way, because, you know, there's a New York Times article where they're talking about the president's like, look, what the Republicans want me to do is implement Romney's platform and pretty much resign. And I think he's not just saying, look, can we at least get this debt ceiling fixed so we don't tank the global economy, but he's trying to set a precedent, not just for his presidency, but for every presidency over the next 2 generations. If this appears to be a fair negotiating tactic, we will never get our government back, whether we have Democrats or Republicans. And I think he's trying to fix that.
Well, I think the main issue here is trust. I was listening to Senator Susan Collins, and she was talking about the effects of not raising the debt ceiling. She says that some Republicans are skeptical because the Treasury Department doesn't exactly tell them how much money it has in the bank to pay these things, and all of a sudden, when they've predicted economic doom and gloom, they come up with some money, and that's why there's skepticism.
There is also skepticism. If you look at who has been elected to Congress since 2010, we have had TARP, we have had multiple flirtations with the debt ceiling. We've also had the government shutdown and sequestration when people were told this is going to be awful, this is going to be terrible. And those calamitous predictions didn't really come to pass. So we're seeing a number of Republicans say, we don't actually think that if we go through the debt ceiling that that's really going to be such a bad thing. To me, that is very dangerous, because nobody knows what would happen if we go through the debt ceiling, because we've never done it before in the history of our republic. I've spoken with a number of economists who say whatever happens with the markets, we cannot pay Social Security recipients, we cannot pay doctors for Medicare. There is no question about that. So I think the conversation is not broad enough.
That. I just talked to a Republican congressman who said, I don't believe that we can't pay for people's Social Security. Yeah. I think they're lying when they say that.
Well, I think, is their calculator lying? You know, get out your calculator. We borrow 40 cents on every dollar. We have to pay our creditors first. What's left over? What are you not going to pay? And only 15% of the budget is discretionary spending. The rest is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We can't pay our bills if we don't raise the debt limit. Maybe that's a risk people are willing to take, and I think we'll find out next week. I mean, it's a very dangerous situation.
Okay, so let's go out on a limb and say, wow, they're going to come up with this short-term deal. For 6 weeks, they're going to raise the debt limit, and they're going to talk. Right. That brings us directly, if we take the 6 weeks from October 17th, that means 6 weeks ends at Thanksgiving. So
Yes.
you can watch the Detroit Lions take on the Green Bay Packers.
Exactly.
You can eat your Thanksgiving Day meal, and you can watch C-SPAN all at the same time. Won't that be fun?
That's going to be a thrill. And the problem is, I hope they can actually get something done. One, we'd have to have members of Congress come back. And I think, and this is why their ratings are so low. I think what's made everyone so angry is Congress appears to have been found flat-footed in so much of this. They're reading the newspaper and finding out what the government shutdown has done. It's like, oh, we didn't know it wouldn't pay for veteran benefits. We didn't know this would happen. And then they go running around with these bills. So I'm hoping they'll take this time to actually read their own laws and come up with a negotiation to solve this problem. That's why everybody's so frustrated.
Yeah, I do think, though, there is a larger conversation we're not having about the debt. And I do think that's where Republicans have a very good point to make. $16 trillion debt ceiling and no plans to make major changes or even small changes in entitlement spending, tax reform. I think those are conversations that are not happening now because of this incredibly partisan atmosphere. Nobody is talking about the real issues. They're just having partisan fights and pointing fingers. And that's why Congress has a 5% approval ratings. Americans are not dumb enough to think that we don't have problems in the budget, but they're smart enough to know that none of us get paid if we don't do our own jobs.
We can all agree with that.
Yeah.
Patricia Murphy, Jason Johnson, thanks so much for being with me
you.
this morning. All